Everything seemed to be working. Nothing was collapsing. No warnings, no visible emergencies. I would wake up, fulfill my obligations, and move on. The feeling was one of control, of stability, of firm ground. But in silence, something had already begun to be lost. This is not a story about getting rich, not even about a sudden fall or an obvious mistake. It's about how I lost everything without realizing it, regarding small decisions made in haste, regarding the false sense of security and thinking, I'll deal with it later, and about the day I had to start over from scratch. No shortcuts, no quick money, just trying to recover something essential, control over one's own life. The loudest sound that night was my own silence. I was sitting in the dark room, too afraid to turn on the light. My phone vibrated again, but I didn't want to see the name. The house seemed too big for someone so small on the inside. I breathed slowly as if each breath cost something, and even so I kept repeating to myself, everything is under control. But at that moment, I already knew I wasn't there. Until recently, I used to walk around with that automatic confidence. I would wake up, go to work, pay the bills, do the same things. I liked the feeling of predictability, like having solid ground. I called it stability, as if it were an acquired right, and I didn't even realize how much I depended on that word to live. When someone mentioned risk, I would smile and change the subject, because for me, danger was always something other people did. The signs didn't arrive like explosions. They arrived like dust. Small things out of place, small pending tasks pushed aside, a delay here, I'll deal with it later there, and life went on. I used to joke about being tired and call worrying drama. I avoided looking closely because looking closely is uncomfortable, and deep down I was afraid of discovering some truth, so I preferred to continue operating in automatic mode. I remember a specific late afternoon, kinda colorless. It was drizzling, and the window was sweating as if it were tired too. I had a to-do list, but I just kept putting it off. I stood there looking at the street, trying to feel some sense of certainty, the kind of certainty that doesn't depend on anything going wrong. But my certainty was fragile, and I didn't want to admit it. I didn't want to realize that I was holding everything up in the air. The truth is, I confused calmness with security. I confused routine with protection, and that made me too relaxed. I prided myself on being able to handle it, even when all I did was push. I felt like an adult, responsible as if that were enough, and I kept repeating that I didn't need to change anything because it was going well. But life doesn't warn you when it's accumulating weight. She just keeps it to herself, waiting for the day when you can't take it anymore. My body started speaking before my head understood. Light sleep, repetitive thoughts, a nameless anxiety. I laughed with the others, but inside I was already distancing myself. There were days when I felt a pressure in my chest for no reason. I used to call it stress, as if that would solve the problem. And I kept going, pretending it wasn't happening to me, that it was just a phase. But a phase doesn't last if you don't change course. I didn't lose everything at once. I lost it in installments, in small lapses of control. First came attention, then peace, then a sense of grounding. And when I realized it, I was already trying to compensate with impulse control, trying to speed up life, trying to fix everything. But I didn't yet know that this was my biggest mistake. The rush to fix on the outside what was crumbling on the inside. That night in the dark, I faced a simple thought. It wasn't about money, it was about direction. I had stopped guiding my life and started just reacting. I realized that I had been running away from facing reality head on. Running away is more tiring than facing it. It just takes you a while to realize it. I stood there in silence, listening to the rain hitting the window pane, and that's where the real hook of my story began. In the following days, nothing changed on the outside. I kept waking up at the same time. The work continued with the same appearance as always. People didn't notice anything different about me. I was still paying bills and replying to messages. Everything seemed normal when someone took a quick look. It was this sense of normalcy that deceived me. I clung to that routine like someone clinging to a buoy. She gave me the feeling that I was still in control. I repeated habits without thinking, just to avoid feeling. Coffee in the same cup, same routes, fixed schedules. The more equal we seemed, the safer I believed I was. I avoided change as if it were a direct threat. Change seemed too dangerous at that moment. There were small alerts scattered throughout the day. A pang of anxiety when the phone rang at inconvenient hours. An account that I kept putting off opening for no clear reason. A conversation I kept putting off. Nothing serious enough to make me stop. But all things considered, it created a silent weight. I chose to ignore it because it was more comfortable. I kept telling myself it was just a rough patch. Everyone goes through this at some point. These phrases have become a kind of shield. They protected me from having to make a decision. While I repeated these excuses, time passed, and time never remains neutral when you remain silent. He charges in a way that makes no noise. I used to confuse the absence of a crisis with being healthy. I thought that if nothing exploded, then everything was fine. That thought made me feel too relaxed. I stopped reviewing, adjusting, and observing. I started only maintaining what already existed, without realizing that maintaining something also requires energy, and I was already spending more than I had. The night started getting longer. I would lie down exhausted, but my mind wouldn't switch off. Thoughts spun around without getting anywhere. I would wake up the next day pretending everything was normal. Inside, something was already out of rhythm. It was like walking with your shoelaces undone without looking. The fall will come eventually. Even so, I maintained the discourse of security. He spoke with conviction when someone asked him a question. I needed to convince others in order to convince myself. The image of stability has become armor, but armor also gains weight over time. And I could already feel the weight on my shoulders, but I still didn't want to quit. That was the most deceptive period of all. Nothing was entirely wrong, but nothing was entirely right either. I kept going without looking at the map, trusting that the road would resolve itself. It was there that the false sense of security took hold, and it was there that the invisible error gained ground. I just didn't know that yet. The mistake didn't come across as a major decision. It came disguised as something practical, almost logical, a small choice made to make your day easier. Nothing seemed dangerous at that moment. I even thought about it for a few seconds before continuing, but I thought in a hurry, not attentively, and that made all the difference later on. I started solving emergencies by taking shortcuts, things that seemed temporary, but became habits. I kept saying it was just a matter of time before we got better organized, that later I would go back to doing it the right way. But later never had a date, and temporary things tend to settle in. Before you know it, it's become the norm. I didn't feel guilty at first. On the contrary, I felt relieved that it was resolved quickly. It was comforting not having to face everything head on. I was saving time, or at least I thought I was. That momentary relief turned into a silent reward, and every reward creates repetition, even when the price is hidden. I started justifying this behavior to myself. He said it was intelligence, adaptability, and resourcefulness. I saw other people doing similar things. This gave me a false sense of normalcy. If everyone does it, it can't be that serious. This comparison made me less attentive, and it makes the mistake more vulnerable if repeated. The problem wasn't the act itself. That was the logic I was building behind it. I started trading control for convenience. I traded clarity for immediate relief. Without realizing it, I was postponing important decisions, and decisions that are postponed don't disappear. They just accumulate in silence. It became easier and easier to repeat the same pattern. The initial discomfort disappeared quickly. The brain learns to normalize almost everything. I no longer questioned the path so much, I just kept going, dealing with the immediate situation, without thinking about the impact this would create. It was a mistake that didn't make a sound. I didn't perceive any immediate loss. Nothing disappeared overnight. This gave me the impression that it was working. But control is not lost through theatricality. It fades away in small concessions, and I was granting it every day, without realizing the magnitude of it. That's how the invisible error took hold. Not as a villain, but as a false ally. He promised ease and delivered fragility. I still felt in control, but the steering wheel no longer responded the same way. I would only find that out later, when the loss started to become visible. At first, I thought it was possible to balance it out. One thing here, another there, everything seemed manageable. I believed I had enough margin, that it could be made up for later, calmly. That later has become a vague promise. And vague promises don't hold any structure together. They only delay the impact. The pressure didn't come as desperation. She came as a constant nuisance, a feeling of always being chased. I would wake up already tired from things I hadn't even done yet. The day was ending and it felt incomplete. I solved a lot of problems, but I completed few, and that made me uneasy. I started negotiating with myself. Just one more adjustment, then I'll stop. This month was atypical, the next one will be better. These phrases have become routine in our minds. They gave me permission to continue making mistakes, but with the appearance of control. It was a polite denial. Outwardly, I maintained composure. He didn't complain, he didn't ask for help. I was proud to have endured everything on my own. Showing weakness seemed like a personal defeat, so I swallowed the pressure and carried on. But the body always demands silence, and he started charging. Decisions became more reactive. I didn't think ahead. I addressed the problems as they arose. This always put me one step behind. I used to rush around putting out small fires. Meanwhile, a larger fire was growing in secret. I pretended not to see the smoke. I started to lose my exact sense of things, not because I didn't know, but because I avoided looking. Looking would require admitting that something has gone off track, and I wasn't ready for that yet. So I kept justifying, rationalizing, creating narratives to avoid facing the facts. That control was already slipping away. Tension became part of the day. I had forgotten what it was like to truly relax. Everything seemed urgent, even when it wasn't. This constant state irritated me. Small things used to drive me crazy, and I realized it, but I didn't know when to stop. It was a clear sign of gradual loss. At that point, I still believed it was possible to turn things around. All it took was a bigger adjustment, the right decision. I still thought I was close to finding a solution, but in reality, I was close to a breakdown. But collapse doesn't give warning. He only approaches while you're explaining yourself. And that's how I reached my limit. The collapse did not happen on a specific day. It was forming like a hidden crack. When it appeared, it was impossible to ignore. The consequences began to pile up. One thing leads to another without pause. I tried to hold on, but I was already weak, and everything became heavy at the same time. I started to really lose sleep. It was no longer mild insomnia, it was exhaustion. I would lie down and feel my body trembling. My mind raced without getting anywhere. I would wake up in the middle of the night for no reason. The silence seemed louder than before, and I no longer had any answers for myself. The accounts are no longer just numbers. They became a daily emotional burden. Each notification gave me a physical fright. I avoided opening important messages. Postponing has become a way to survive, but postponing it also fueled fear, and the fear doesn't stay quiet. At work, my attention started to fail. Simple things required too much effort. I reread the same information several times. The body was there, but the head was missing. I felt ashamed of this silent fall. It's a shame that I'm not performing like I used to. I'm ashamed of myself. People started noticing changes. Questions arose carefully. Are you okay? You look tired. I would respond with short, pre-prepared phrases. I didn't want to open up space for conversation, because talking meant admitting, and admitting it still hurt too much. I started isolating myself without planning it. Invitations went unanswered. Unanswered calls have become commonplace. I didn't want to explain anything to anyone. I just wanted to disappear for a while. But disappearing doesn't solve the reality. She's still there, waiting. The worst part wasn't losing material possessions. It was losing the feeling of internal control. I no longer trusted my own decisions. Everything seemed fragile, unstable, insecure. I felt small within my own life, and that hurts more than any number, because it affects who you think you are. It was in that state that I realized something was wrong. I wasn't trying to improve anymore. I was just trying not to make things worse. And living like that is not living. It's about resisting in silence until you're exhausted. I had reached my emotional breaking point, and rock bottom was right there. There's no sign at rock bottom. You realize you've arrived when you stop fighting. I woke up one day with no desire to get out of bed. It wasn't laziness, it was total exhaustion. A heavy body, an empty mind. I spent a few minutes staring at the ceiling. No rush, no plan, no reaction. Shame became a constant companion. Shame on me for not having seen it sooner. Shame on me for persisting in the mistake. I'm ashamed that I can't explain what happened. I avoided mirrors and long conversations. Every question felt like a demand, and I was already putting too much pressure on myself. I started to reduce the world to its bare minimum. Bed, bathroom, cold coffee, silence. I didn't want news, nor opinions. Any stimulus seemed too much. The isolation was not a conscious decision. It was a self-protective reflex, even knowing that it would only make me more withdrawn. There were days when I thought about disappearing, not dramatically, but quietly. Disappear from the radar, from expectations, from comparisons. I wanted a break, but I didn't know how to ask for it. All I knew was how to endure. And there's an invisible limit to what you can endure. I was very close to him. The nights were the worst. The darkness amplified everything. Thoughts came without a filter. Past mistakes seemed gigantic. The future seemed like a distant blur. I felt a constant tightness in my chest, as if something were always about to collapse. That's when I stopped pretending to be strong. Not out of courage, but out of lack of choice. I accepted that I could no longer maintain the image, that I needed to face the situation head on. No excuses, no pretty narratives, just reality as it was. And she wasn't comfortable. I had nothing left to prove, neither for me nor for others. This realization was strange and liberating. When pride is gone, space abounds, space to breathe, even if it hurts. It was in this void that something began to change, even though I didn't realize it yet. There, deep down, I finally stopped. Not to give up, but to stop pretending. It was the most honest silence I've ever experienced, and it was from him that consciousness was born. Not as an immediate hope, but as a first point of contact. Who was I really being with? Consciousness did not come as complete clarity. She came along as a nuisance that was hard to ignore. A feeling that I needed to look back, not to blame me, but to understand. I sat alone for the first time in a long time. No distractions, no escaping, no rush. It was just me and what had happened. I started to reconsider choices without excessive emotion. It was no longer anger nor self-pity. It was almost a lucid weariness. I could see where I had relaxed too much, where I had traded care for convenience. No drama, no heroic narrative, just facts, one after another. Accepting it was harder than falling, because acceptance requires stopping the need to justify. I had to admit that no one pushed me. It wasn't bad luck nor a conspiracy. I actively participated in the process, even when I thought I was just reacting. That truth hurt, but it cleared the air. I realized that my mistake wasn't trying to grow. I tried to accelerate when I was already unstable. I confused movement with progress. I confused urgency with solution. And without realizing it, I relinquished control. Not for anyone, but for the sake of urgency. And haste saves no one. This acceptance did not bring immediate relief. She brought responsibility, a silent and heavy responsibility. But unlike guilt, it doesn't paralyze. It demands presence and attention. I started to feel something new. Not hope, but clarity. I stopped looking for mental shortcuts. I stopped thinking about quick fixes. I needed to rebuild the foundation, not the facade. And a foundation isn't built with anxiety. She does it with uncomfortable patience, through repetition, through humility. And I wasn't used to that. It was at that point that I accepted starting small, truly small, without romanticizing it, without telling anyone, without announcing the change. I just needed to regain confidence in my own steps, even if they were slow and unreliable. Acceptance opened the door for this, a quiet yet real space. I understood that control doesn't return in a snap. It gradually returns when you stop running, when you face what you avoid, when you respect your own limits. This awareness was not the end of the pain, but that was the end of the denial, and that changed everything inside. The restart didn't have a victorious atmosphere. There was no music, nor a sense of change. There was silence, and a certain constant insecurity. I started by adjusting basic things in my day. Nothing grand, nothing that would impress anyone. Just small, more conscious choices, and that already demanded a lot from me. I stopped trying to solve everything at once. I learned to deal with one day at a time, one task at a time. I needed to feel like I was able to accomplish something, even if it was too simple for others. To me, that was reconstruction. It was about regaining confidence in one's own word. I started observing more and reacting less. Before deciding, I would breathe. Before answering, I thought. I slowed down on purpose. This gave me a strange feeling of being behind, but gradually it became a feeling of presence. I was really there. The focus has shifted away from winning or recovering quickly. I didn't want to repeat the cycle of rushing. I wanted internal stability first, control over decisions, not over outcomes. This change was silent, but profound. I stopped looking outside so much, and I started taking care of what depended on me. Some people found my more reserved manner strange. Others didn't notice any change at all, and that's okay, because it wasn't about them. It was about me supporting myself without pretending, without having to prove anything to anyone. This discreet freedom was important. She gave me space to continue. There were good days, and there were difficult days. The restart doesn't follow a straight line. Sometimes I felt like speeding up again. Anxiety still appeared without warning, but now I recognized the sign. And to acknowledge that, It was already a huge step forward. I didn't judge myself. I adjusted. I learned that control is not rigidity. It is awareness applied to daily life. It's about knowing what goes in and what goes out, not just resources but energy. I started protecting my time, choosing more carefully where I got involved. This gave me back some peace. This fresh start didn't make me rich. It didn't offer me shortcuts or magic solutions, but it gave me back something essential, the feeling of direction. I knew where I was stepping, and after all, that was enough. It was the real beginning of a new phase. Today, when I look back, I feel no pride. I feel respect for the path I had to travel. Nothing was wasted, even though it hurt so much. I learned more in silence than in noise, more focused on losing than trying to win quickly. And this lesson has no form, nor number. She just stays. I understood that control is not absolute dominion. It is a constant presence in one's own choices. It's about knowing when to stop before getting lost. It's about accepting limitations without feeling inferior. I haven't gone back to being who I was before. I will become a more attentive person, and that changed everything. Losing everything showed me what truly sustains me. It wasn't about resources, status, or appearance. It was the ability to look at oneself honestly, to accept one's own mistakes without destroying oneself, to continue even without guarantees. This doesn't show up in pretty pictures or stories, but it holds up the ground. I no longer chase after quick fixes, not because I learned the perfect lesson, but because I learned the price of haste. Today, I prefer firm and simple steps. I prefer clarity to promises. I prefer internal control to immediate results. And that choice keeps me whole. If someone were to ask me what has changed, I would say it was the way he walked. I no longer need to prove that I can handle it. I just need to be aware of what I'm doing. This protects me from repeating the cycle, not out of fear but out of maturity. And that's enough for me. This story isn't about lost money, it's about direction lost and regained, about learning to stop before you break down, about accepting that starting over is a process. No applause, no guarantees, no shortcuts. Simply continuing with more awareness. And that's enough. I'm moving forward with less urgency, with more care and less noise. I know I could fall again, but now I know how to observe myself. And that changes the relationship with error. It ceases to be the end, and it becomes just a course correction. This is how I rebuilt the control, without chasing after quick money, without trying to make up for the past, just respecting the present. And in the end, that's what brought me peace. Not the feeling of victory, but the peace of mind that comes from moving forward consciously,